I need to type this out before I lose my mind, because what the actual just happened to my life in the last 72 hours. So Thursday afternoon, I'm at Target grabbing laundry detergent, and my phone starts blowing up with a number I don't recognize. I almost didn't answer because who actually calls anymore, right? But something made me pick up, and I hear this woman sobbing on the other end, like full-on crying, barely able to breathe. She goes, "Sweetie, it's Jeanette, Eugene's mom, and I just wanted to check in on you and the baby. How are you feeling? When's your due date? We're so excited to meet our first grandchild." I literally stood there in the middle of the laundry aisle holding a bottle of Tide like a complete idiot because my brain just stopped working. I said, "I'm sorry, what baby? There must be some confusion." The line went totally silent. Then she said in this really small voice, "You're pregnant. Eugene told us 2 months ago. You're having our grandchild." I told her as clearly as I could that I was not pregnant, had never been pregnant, and had absolutely no idea what she was talking about. She started crying harder and just hung up on me. I stood there staring at my phone thinking this had to be some kind of joke or mistake, except Eugene and I had been together for almost 2 years, and I'd met his parents exactly 3 times because they live 4 hours away, and honestly, they're pretty intense with the whole religious conservative thing. I tried calling Eugene immediately. He didn't answer. Texted him that his mom just called me about a pregnancy that doesn't exist, and he needed to call me right now. He texted back like an hour later saying he was at work and would explain everything when he got home. Would explain everything, like this was some minor misunderstanding and not his mother calling me about a baby I'm supposedly carrying. I went home and tried to keep myself busy, but I was losing it. Started going through everything in my head trying to figure out if this was some weird miscommunication, but how do you miscommunicate a whole pregnancy? Then my phone started going off again. This time it was a number saved in my contacts as Eugene's dad. His dad was not crying. He was pissed. Started asking me why I would tell Jeanette I wasn't pregnant when they'd been planning for this baby for 2 months, when they'd already sent money for medical bills and baby furniture and everything the baby would need for the first year. They'd rearranged their whole lives to be supportive grandparents despite being disappointed we weren't married first. I told him the same thing I told Jeanette. I am not pregnant and have never been pregnant, and I have no idea why Eugene would tell them I was. His dad said Eugene had called them in tears back in August saying we just found out, that we were scared but happy, and that he needed help because I had some medical complications and we couldn't afford all the expenses. They'd immediately transferred $20,000 to help us. $20,000 for a baby that did not exist. I actually felt like I was going to pass out. His dad kept talking, saying how hurt they were that I was denying everything now, asking if something was wrong with the baby, if I'd lost it and was too traumatized to admit it. I kept repeating that there was never any pregnancy, and finally just said I needed to talk to Eugene and hung up. Eugene finally came home around 8, and I was sitting on the couch waiting for him. I asked him very calmly what the hell his parents were talking about. He immediately said it was complicated and I wouldn't understand. I told him to make me understand why his mother thinks I'm pregnant when I'm very clearly not. That's when he admitted he'd told them I was pregnant back in August. Said he needed money for some investments that would pay off huge, and his parents would never give him money for that, but they'd give it for a grandchild. He said it was supposed to be temporary. He was going to tell them I had a miscarriage in a few months and they'd never know. He figured by then he'd have made enough money to pay them back anyway. I just stared at him. This man I'd been with for almost 2 years, who I'd been thinking might actually be someone I could build a future with, had casually committed fraud against his own parents and made me an unwilling accomplice. I asked him where the $20,000 was and he got really vague, saying some of it went to investments and some to necessary expenses. I told him he needed to tell his parents the truth immediately. He refused, said it would destroy his relationship with them and they'd demand all the money back right away and he didn't have it anymore. I asked what he spent $20,000 on in 2 months if not actual investments, and he wouldn't give me a straight answer. Just kept saying I didn't understand how these things worked, and it wasn't as simple as I was making it. We fought for 2 hours. I told him this was insane, that he'd lied to his parents about their first grandchild, taken their money under false pretenses, and now his mom had called me crying about a baby that doesn't exist. He kept trying to convince me to just go along with it for a little while longer, said we could tell them I miscarried next month and it would all blow over. I told him absolutely not. I said I was not going to participate in defrauding his family and making them think I lost a baby. That's sick. He got really angry then and said I was being dramatic and unsupportive, that couples help each other out in tough situations. I told him this wasn't a tough situation, this was a crime, and I wanted nothing to do with it. He ended up leaving, said he was going to stay with his friend Tony for a few days until I calmed down. Calmed down. Like I was being hysterical instead of righteously furious about being made an accessory to stealing from his parents. Friday morning, I woke up to a string of Facebook messages from Eugene's Aunt Claire asking if I was okay, and if the baby was okay because Jeanette had told the whole family I'd denied being pregnant, and they were all very concerned. Then Eugene's cousin Brittany texted me saying she'd heard about the miscarriage and was so sorry for our loss. The miscarriage I hadn't had, because there was no pregnancy. Eugene had already started telling people I'd lost the baby and was too traumatized to talk about it, which made me look like the liar who was denying everything. I called him immediately, and he actually answered this time, told him he needed to fix this now and tell everyone the truth. He said he'd already told his parents I'd miscarried and they were devastated, but at least now it was over and we could move on. I completely lost it. Screamed at him that his parents just lost a grandchild that never existed, that his whole family thinks I'm either lying or too traumatized to cope, and that he'd stolen $20,000 from people who trusted him. He told me I was making this worse than it needed to be, and hung up on me. That's when members of his family started really coming after me. His mom called me again, this time asking why I was telling people there was never a pregnancy when they had proof Eugene had told them about it months ago. His aunt messaged me saying I needed to stop playing games and be honest about losing the baby so the family could support me properly. His younger sister, Lauren, sent me this long message about how she knew miscarriage was traumatic, but lying about it wasn't healthy, and I needed to seek help. Everyone thought I was the problem, the liar, the one making everything complicated. I tried explaining to Lauren that there never was a pregnancy, that Eugene had made everything up. She straight up told me she didn't believe me because why would her brother lie about something like that? Said it was clear I was going through something and needed professional help to deal with my grief. By Friday evening, I was getting messages from multiple family members, all of them either offering sympathy for my loss or asking me to stop denying what happened. A few of them were getting nasty about it, saying I was causing his parents unnecessary pain by refusing to admit the truth. The truth being that I'd supposedly lost a baby that never existed in the first place. I didn't know what to do. Eugene was still refusing to tell anyone the real story. His family was convinced I was either a liar or mentally unstable. And I had no proof that I'd never been pregnant because how do you prove a negative? I couldn't exactly send them my medical records without violating my own privacy. Saturday, I drove to the pharmacy and bought 3 different pregnancy tests just to have documentation that I wasn't pregnant now, even though that didn't prove I hadn't been pregnant before. Took all 3 tests, all negative obviously, took pictures of them with timestamps. It felt ridiculous, but I needed something. Then Eugene's dad called me again. This time he was even angrier, said they wanted their money back immediately, and if I didn't stop lying about the pregnancy, they were going to take legal action. I tried one more time to explain that Eugene had lied to them, that I'd only found out about any of this 3 days ago when Jeanette called me. He said Eugene had already shown them text messages between us discussing the pregnancy and my medical appointments. Text messages that did not exist, that Eugene had somehow faked. I realized right then how deep this went. He hadn't just told a lie and taken money. He'd created fake evidence to back it up, made it look like I was in on everything from the start. And now his entire family believed I was the villain in this situation. That's where I am right now. Eugene's family thinks I'm lying about a miscarriage I never had because there was never a pregnancy to begin with. I have no idea what Eugene actually spent that money on, or if there ever were any investments. And I'm sitting here with 3 negative pregnancy tests wondering how the hell I'm supposed to prove I didn't lose a baby that never existed. First update. Thank you so much for all the comments and support. I've been reading through everything, and honestly, some of you are savage and I'm living for it. The person who said Eugene belongs in jail and not in a relationship? Correct. So obviously things have gotten exponentially worse since I posted on Saturday, and I need to update because I'm legitimately spiraling and also furious, and I need to vent this out before I actually explode. Sunday morning, Eugene showed up at my apartment unannounced. Just knocked on the door at like 9 a.m. while I was still in my pajamas drinking coffee and trying to process the absolute dumpster fire my life had become. I opened the door and he was standing there with this pathetic expression like he was the victim in all this. He said we needed to talk and could he please come in? I should have slammed the door in his face, but honestly, I wanted answers more than I wanted to maintain my dignity, so I let him in. Big mistake. We sat down and he immediately launched into this whole speech about how he knew I was mad, but I had to understand his perspective. His perspective being that his parents are super controlling and never let him make his own financial decisions, and he'd found this amazing investment opportunity through Tony that was guaranteed to triple the money in 6 months. He just needed startup capital and knew his parents would never give him money for investing. But they'd been pressuring him about grandkids for years anyway, so it seemed like the perfect solution. I asked him how exactly lying about a pregnancy and stealing $20,000 from his parents seemed like any kind of solution. He said it wasn't stealing because he was going to pay them back with the profits. I pointed out that it's been 2 months, and where exactly were these profits? Where was any of the money? That's when things got really interesting. He admitted the investment hadn't worked out the way Tony said it would, and actually they'd lost most of that money already. But he'd put some aside for other important things. I asked what things, and he got super vague again, talking about opportunities and networking and building connections. I was getting more suspicious by the second, so I straight up asked him if he'd spent any of that money on himself. He tried to deflect, but I kept pushing, and finally he admitted he'd bought a truck. A truck. Said his old car was falling apart and he needed reliable transportation, and it was technically an investment in his future earning potential. I asked him how much the truck cost. He said $15,000. $15,000 of his parents' money that they gave him for their non-existent grandchild went to buying him a truck while he'd been telling me for months he was broke and couldn't afford to take me anywhere nice. I absolutely lost it. Started yelling about how he'd been claiming he couldn't even pay for dinner half the time while he was driving around in a truck he bought with stolen money from his religious parents, who thought they were supporting their pregnant future daughter-in-law. He tried to calm me down and said I was being unreasonable, that the car situation was a legitimate emergency and he'd needed to handle it. Then I asked about the other $5,000, and he got really quiet. Finally admitted he'd taken a girl named Kara out a few times, some girl he'd met at a networking event, took her to nice restaurants, and paid for a weekend trip to some resort 2 hours away because he was trying to impress her for business connections, with his parents' grandchild money, while telling me he was broke. I was screaming at this point, asked him if he'd been cheating on me this entire time while committing fraud against his family and making me look like a lunatic. He swore it wasn't cheating, it was networking, and Kara knew people in his industry and it was all completely professional. Professional dinners and professional weekend getaways, apparently. I told him to get out. He refused and said we needed to figure out how to handle this together because his family was threatening legal action, and if I didn't back up his story about the miscarriage, we were both going to be in serious trouble. I said I was in zero trouble because I didn't do anything and he needed to tell his parents the truth immediately. He actually laughed at me, said there was no way he was confessing now because they'd completely disown him and probably try to press charges, and I needed to think about what was best for both of us. I told him what was best for both of us was for us to not be in US anymore, and he needed to leave my apartment. He got angry then and said I was being selfish and short-sighted. That his parents' money wasn't even the real issue. The issue was that I couldn't keep my mouth shut when his mom called and had to go and blow everything up. Blamed me for this whole situation because I told Jeanette the truth instead of just going along with it. I physically pushed him toward the door at that point because I was genuinely afraid I might actually hurt him if he stayed any longer. He left, but not before telling me I was making a huge mistake and was going to regret not supporting him through this. The second he was gone, I called his parents, got Jeanette on the phone, and tried one more time to explain that Eugene had lied about everything, that there was never a pregnancy, that he'd spent their money on a truck and taking some other woman on dates. She started crying immediately and said she didn't understand why I was doing this to them, why I was trying to turn them against their own son. I asked her if she wanted proof. She said what kind of proof could I possibly have that I wasn't pregnant when Eugene had shown them text messages between us about doctor appointments and baby names. I told her those texts were fake and I could prove I'd never been to any prenatal appointments. She said she needed to talk to Eugene first and hung up. 10 minutes later, Eugene was calling me absolutely raging, said I'd betrayed him and gone behind his back to his parents, and now they were questioning everything and I'd ruined his life. I told him he'd ruined his own life by being a lying thief and hung up on him. Then the real harassment started. His sister Lauren started blowing up my phone with messages about what a terrible person I was for trying to destroy their family. His Aunt Claire posted something on Facebook about people who fake trauma for attention without naming me directly, but making it very obvious who she meant. His cousin Brittany sent me this long message about how she'd always thought I seemed fake, and now everyone could see my true colors. Monday I had to go to work and could barely function because my phone kept going off with messages from various members of Eugene's family. His dad sent me a formal text demanding I provide proof of the pregnancy and subsequent miscarriage within 48 hours, or they'd be pursuing legal action for fraud. Fraud against me. I responded that I couldn't provide proof of something that never happened, and suggested they ask Eugene for bank statements showing where their $20,000 actually went. He replied that Eugene had already shown them receipts for medical bills and baby supplies. More fake documents, apparently. That's when I realized I needed to actually do something concrete instead of just defending myself. During my lunch break, I went to my gynecologist's office and requested my complete medical records from the past year. The receptionist asked if everything was okay, and I just said I needed documentation for a personal matter. She was nice about it and said they'd have everything ready by Wednesday. I also went to the bank and got statements from my own account showing that I'd never received or deposited any large sums of money, never made any purchases related to baby items or medical expenses. Felt ridiculous gathering evidence to prove I hadn't been pregnant, but at this point, I needed something to fight back with. Tuesday morning, Eugene showed up at my apartment again. This time, I didn't let him in, just talked to him through the door. He was begging now, saying his parents had cut off contact with him and were demanding he return the money immediately, and he didn't have it. Said they'd kicked him out and he'd been staying with Tony, but Tony was getting sick of him and he had nowhere to go. I told him that wasn't my problem and he'd made his choices. He started crying, actual tears, saying he'd made mistakes, but he'd only done it because he loved me and wanted to build a future for us, and the investment was supposed to make everything better. I asked him how taking another woman on a romantic weekend getaway was building a future with me. He claimed that whole thing with Kara had been exaggerated, that it was really just networking and I was taking it the wrong way. I asked him point blank if he'd slept with her. He hesitated way too long before saying no. That hesitation told me everything. I told him through the door that we were done, completely finished, and if he ever contacted me again, I'd file a restraining order. He started getting angry again, yelling about how I was abandoning him when he needed me most, how a real partner would stand by him through difficult times. I said a real partner wouldn't commit fraud and cheat on me with money stolen from his parents. He finally left, but not before kicking my door and leaving a dent in it. Great. Wednesday. I picked up my medical records and spent the evening going through everything. Clear documentation that I hadn't been pregnant, hadn't had any prenatal care, hadn't had a miscarriage. I scanned everything and saved it to my phone and laptop. Thursday, I got a message from Eugene's mom asking if we could meet in person. She said she wanted to hear my side of the story directly and was willing to listen. I was suspicious, but also desperate to make someone in that family understand the truth, so I agreed to meet her at a diner near my apartment Friday morning. Friday, I got there early and ordered coffee, sat in a booth near the back trying to prepare myself for what was probably going to be an ambush. Jeanette showed up exactly on time, looking exhausted and about 10 years older than when I'd met her at Christmas last year. We sat there for a minute in uncomfortable silence before she asked me very quietly if I could please just tell her the truth about what really happened. I laid it all out for her. Showed her my medical records proving no pregnancy. Showed her my bank statements proving I'd never received or spent any money on baby-related items. Told her about Eugene admitting he'd bought a truck and taken Kara on expensive dates with their money. She started crying silently while looking through everything on my phone. Asked me why Eugene would do this to them. Why their son would lie about something so sacred. I didn't have an answer that would make her feel better, so I just said I didn't know. But I'd only found out about any of this when she called me the previous Thursday. Then she told me something that made my blood boil. Eugene had been sending her and his dad regular updates about my pregnancy for the entire 2 months. Talking about ultrasound appointments that never happened, telling them about morning sickness I never had, sharing fake photos he'd apparently downloaded from the internet of ultrasounds and positive pregnancy tests. He'd built this entire elaborate fantasy and trapped both me and them in it. She asked if she could take screenshots of my medical records to show her husband. I said yes and watched her hands shake while she did it. She apologized to me multiple times, said she should have trusted me from the beginning, but Eugene had been so convincing. I told her I understood and that I was sorry she was going through this. We sat there for almost an hour while she asked me questions about the timeline and what Eugene had said to me. I told her everything, including the part about Kara. She looked absolutely destroyed. Finally, she said she needed to go talk to her husband and they'd be dealing with Eugene directly. I drove home feeling slightly relieved that at least one person in that family finally believed me. But that relief lasted about 2 hours because then Eugene started calling me non-stop from different numbers since I'd blocked his main one, leaving voicemails screaming about how I'd betrayed him and turned his parents against him, and now they were cutting him off completely, and it was all my fault. All my fault. For telling the truth about his lies. Saturday afternoon, his dad called me from Jeanette's phone. Very formal and cold, said they owed me an apology for doubting me and they'd be pursuing their legal options regarding Eugene. Asked me if I'd be willing to provide a statement to their attorney about what Eugene had told me regarding the money. I said I would. Then he asked if I knew where Eugene was currently staying because they'd been trying to reach him, and he wasn't responding. I said last I'd heard he was staying with Tony, but I didn't have Tony's contact information, and honestly wanted nothing more to do with any of this. He thanked me stiffly and hung up. I felt weird about the whole thing, but mostly just relieved that his parents finally knew the truth. That relief lasted until Sunday evening when Eugene showed up at my apartment building at like 10 p.m., absolutely losing it. I saw him from my window standing in the parking lot yelling up at my building about how I'd ruined his life and his family hated him and he had nowhere to go. My neighbor Anne from 2 doors down actually came out and told him to leave or she'd call the cops. He started screaming that this was between him and his girlfriend and everyone needed to mind their own business. Anne told him she was calling the police anyway and pulled out her phone. He finally got in his truck and peeled out of the parking lot. I'm sitting here now on Sunday night absolutely terrified he's going to come back and not sure what to do next. His family knows the truth finally, but he's completely unhinged and blaming me for everything. I've got my medical records and bank statements as proof, but I don't know if that's even enough at this point. I still don't know if he actually slept with Kara, or if there are other things he spent that money on that he hasn't admitted to. Last update. Okay, so to everyone who told me to get a restraining order immediately, you were right, and I should have listened sooner. But here's what happened over the last week. Monday morning, I woke up to someone knocking on my door at like 7 a.m. I looked through the peephole and it was Tony, Eugene's friend, who I'd met maybe twice before. I opened the door with the chain still on and asked what he wanted. He looked uncomfortable as hell and said Eugene had been staying with him since his parents kicked him out, but Tony's lease doesn't allow long-term guests and his landlord was getting suspicious. He wanted to know if Eugene could stay with me for a few weeks until he figured things out. I actually laughed in his face. Told Tony that Eugene was a lying thief who'd committed fraud against his own parents and cheated on me with money he stole. And if he thought I'd let that pathetic waste of space into my apartment, he was as stupid as Eugene. Tony said Eugene had told him a completely different story about me freaking out over a misunderstanding. I asked Tony if Eugene had mentioned the $20,000 he stole from his parents by lying about me being pregnant, or did he conveniently leave that part out? Tony's face changed immediately, started asking me questions about what actually happened, and I gave him the whole story. Then Tony said something that made me want to scream. He asked if I knew Eugene had borrowed $5,000 from him back in September for an investment opportunity they were supposedly doing together. Except Eugene had told Tony that I'd contributed $10,000, and Tony's $5,000 would complete it. There was no investment. Eugene had just stolen from Tony too. Tony looked like he was going to be sick. I told him Eugene had spent the money on a truck and taking some girl named Kara on expensive dates and hotel stays. Tony actually punched my doorframe and asked if I'd talk to Eugene's parents because he wanted his money back too. I said I'd already given them everything, but Tony could do whatever he needed to do. About 2 hours later, Eugene called me from yet another number I didn't recognize. Started yelling about how I'd turned Tony against him too. And now he literally had nowhere to stay and no money, and it was all my fault. I cut him off and told him the only thing that was my fault was wasting 2 years on a pathetic con artist who was too stupid to even pull off his own scam without getting caught. He tried to say I was being cruel, and didn't I care that he was essentially homeless? I said no. I genuinely did not care if he was sleeping under a bridge because that's exactly what liars and cheaters deserve. Asked him how Kara was doing, and if she knew he was broke now or if he was trying to scam her too. He insisted again that Kara wasn't cheating, it was networking. I asked him how many times he'd networked himself into her bed. Silence. Then he admitted it had happened a few times, but it didn't mean anything. I told him he was such a worthless piece of garbage that he couldn't even cheat on me with his own money. He had to steal from his parents to do it. Then I hung up. He kept calling back from different numbers, and I kept answering just to tell him what a complete failure he was before hanging up again. Called him a broke loser living off stolen money. Told him his parents were ashamed of him and he'd die alone because nobody could trust him. Every time he called, I had something new to say about how pathetic he was. Tuesday, I had to give my official statement to the attorney Eugene's parents had hired. Met with Arthur at his office downtown and spent 2 hours going over everything in detail. Arthur told me Eugene's parents were pursuing this formally and asked if I'd testify. I said absolutely. I'd love to watch Eugene squirm in court. Then Arthur mentioned they'd discovered Eugene had also taken out a credit card in his dad's name back in July and run up about $8,000 before they caught it. All restaurants and hotels. All more dates with Kara, funded by fraud. When I got home, I was furious all over again, thinking about how Eugene had looked me in the eye and told me he was too broke to take me anywhere nice while he was spending thousands on another woman with stolen money. Wednesday evening, Eugene showed up at my workplace right as I was leaving. Came out to find him leaning against my car. My coworker Teresa was with me and immediately sensed something was wrong. Eugene tried to act casual and said he just wanted to talk. I told him the only thing I wanted was for him to get his pathetic self away from my car before I had him arrested for harassment. He said his parents were trying to ruin his life, and I was the only person who could help him. I asked what kind of help he wanted. He said if I told his parents I'd been in on the pregnancy plan from the beginning, that we'd done it together, they might be more forgiving and wouldn't press charges. I stared at him for a solid 10 seconds before I started laughing. Told him he was actually stupider than I thought if he believed I'd tank my own life to save his worthless ass. Called him a coward for trying to drag me down with him. Said the only thing I'd tell his parents is that their son is a lying, cheating thief who deserves everything coming to him. He started getting agitated and saying couples were supposed to protect each other. I said we're not a couple. We're nothing. And the only thing I wanted to protect was my reputation from being associated with a complete loser who couldn't even commit fraud successfully. Teresa stepped forward and told Eugene to leave. He ignored her and kept trying to convince me this was all a misunderstanding that spiraled out of control. That if I really loved him, I'd help fix it. I told him I didn't love him, I didn't respect him, and honestly looking at him made me embarrassed I'd ever touched him. Said he was a broke con artist playing dress up as a functional adult and now everyone could see what a fraud he really was. Told him to enjoy being homeless and alone because that's exactly what he deserved. He finally left but kept yelling about how I'd regret being so cruel to him. I yelled back that the only thing I regretted was not seeing what loser he was 2 years ago. Thursday, I filed for a restraining order. Listed every instance of harassment and the courthouse clerk said I'd definitely get approved given the pattern. The restraining order got approved. I immediately gave a copy to my apartment complex and they said Eugene wasn't allowed on the property. Saturday morning, I woke up to Instagram DMs from strangers. Eugene had posted this long rant about how his life was destroyed by a vindictive woman who'd lied about a miscarriage and turned his family against him. Tagged mutual friends and everything. I screenshot it all and sent it to Arthur, who said Eugene was basically building the case against himself. The post came down by afternoon, but people had already seen it. Sunday, Eugene's dad called and asked about the Instagram post. I said I'd already sent it to their attorney. He told me they'd filed a civil suit and were considering criminal charges for the credit card fraud. Asked if I knew where Eugene was staying since Tony had kicked him out. I said I had no idea and didn't care. Wednesday, I got a Facebook message from an account I didn't recognize. Long rambling thing from Eugene about how he'd made mistakes but still loved me and couldn't understand why I'd chosen to destroy him instead of helping him. I responded this time. Told him he'd destroyed himself by being a lying, cheating thief and I'd just refused to go down with him. Said his parents were right to disown him and he'd end up exactly where he belonged, alone and broke with nobody to scam anymore. Said he was pathetic and I hoped he thought about what garbage he was every single day. Then I blocked the account. Thursday, Eugene's mom called to update me. They'd found Eugene at a motel an hour away. He'd been asking family members for money, but everyone had turned him down. The civil suit was moving forward with a court date in a few months. Eugene's facing real consequences now. And I made sure to tell him exactly what I thought of him every chance I got because he deserved to hear it. As for me, I'm better than okay. Changed my number so he can't keep calling. Teresa still walks me to my car, which is sweet. And I'm proud of myself for not just standing up to Eugene, but actively making sure he knew what a worthless failure he was. To everyone who commented telling me to run, you were right. To the person who said Eugene belonged in jail, we'll see what happens with those criminal charges. And to anyone reading this in a similar situation, Don't just tell the truth. Make sure the person who wronged you knows exactly what you think of them. Don't be nice about it. They don't deserve your kindness, and you deserve the satisfaction of telling them what garbage they really are. I'm done with Eugene. He can rot in whatever hole he's living in now.